ready.
Okay.
Hello. Week 2 of our herb walks. It's April 4th. And there are a few things that are coming up out of the ground. And let's just look at this one here. And this is a wild edible. The name is ramps. It's in the allium family, and they're a woodland plant. They're really easy to grow in a garden, in a shade garden. They come up really early in the spring, and what I like about them is they come up around Easter, and once it grows a little bit more, they kind of look like bunny ears, and so it reminds me of like the Easter bunny when they come up. And so if you see bunny ears in the woods, ramps are in the allium family, so they're an onion. They are highly sought after. When you buy them in the store, they have bulbs on the bottom to keep them preserved. When you're eating them at home, you don't need to take the bulb. You can use the leaf and cook with the leaf, and it will grow the next year. And actually what I do, and where I got the ramps that I have in my yard, and I have a lot of them, and that one looks more like bunny ears. This one, if you go from this side, it looks more like bunny ears coming up out of the ground, or the shape. It's kind of hard to get. What I actually do is I go to the co-op and buy, there we go, bunny ears, yes. And I buy the ramps that they're selling, and it's like $2.99 for 8 of them. And I eat the greens, and then I put the bulb in the ground, and I have ramps all over my yard. And so I never, and the only reason the bulb is on there, I mean, the bulb you can pickle and all that stuff, but you kill the plant when you eat the bulb. So I just eat the greens, and they taste really good with eggs. You can pickle them, and then I put the bulb in the ground, and I get 8 ramp plants for $2.99. The other plant I have in my garden is this cute little one that looks like it's doing the mountain pose. There's another one that actually looks even more like this little one. It has like the mountain pose for yoga, and they all come up looking like they're in the mountain pose. They just are kind of all over. And this is one of my favorite plants. They're just really sweet. They're not going to be available for harvesting until June 21st, and that's agrimony. And we don't see a lot of that in the woods, but so this plant here is stinging nettles. When they're this small and they're just popping out of the ground, they don't sting that much, so I can rub them. Oh, that stung. Well, and this is my favorite springtime edible. I wait for them all year, and you can only harvest them for edible until they're about 2 feet tall, because the proteins in the plant change and they could harm the kidneys, and so it's really good to harvest them. They're not quite big enough, although I could probably use them if I was really hungry. But basically, with stinging nettles, you just steam them and use them like kale or spinach. In any recipe you can steam them, but I keep them in my yard, and what I do is I just take them from here and clip them off the top, and they don't sting me then, especially in the spring when they're young. And then you can steam those up. I usually wait for them to be a little bit bigger, so this is a little early. I mean, they just popped out of the ground. This, you can harvest a bunch of them and eat them. We try to eat them almost every day in my family because they have more nutrition than any green you could buy in the store. They're full of magnesium, calcium, potassium, vitamins A, C, and E, protein, manganese, basically every mineral you could possibly want. And I'll wait till they get a little bit bigger, and they do spread. But I tend to not wear gloves with them when I harvest them, but most people wear gloves or cut them with the scissors because of the sting. The sting is called the 7-minute itch. After harvesting them for days on days on days, I end up with buzzing hands, even if I'm pretty good at it. And these need to be steamed or dried to get rid of the stingers. You can't eat them fresh. If I ate them fresh now, my throat would be stinging, so I avoid that. But just a fantastic spring edible on top of everything else you can do when they're dried. Now you can't harvest them for dried herb after they're 2 feet tall because of that protein. So this is something that you have to harvest by solstice or June 21st. And if you don't get it by then, the only thing you can wait for is the seeds of it. And the seeds are really expensive. They're $40 a pound right now. And I harvest those in September. But otherwise, I try to get the edible form, and then I wait till they get bigger, and then I do my dried teas. I never seem to harvest enough dried nettles. But definitely eat these. I put it in my mouth if it was steamed, but this is a little bit young, but you can find these in parks and that kind of stuff. This here, one of the other plants that's coming up in my garden, well, there's a couple here. This here is valerian, and I ran out of valerian this year, so I might have to just dig up some of the plants. It spreads a lot, but this is valerian. Another plant in my garden ooh, this nettles is almost getting to almost the right size for harvesting. I would, this nettles here, it's a little bigger. Those are getting close to the right size to start snipping off the tops and harvesting them. This plant right here, it's cute. It has a little bulbous thing here. This is Angelica. And this is the Angelica, Archangelica, which is the European species. And it's in its 2nd year of growth, and it's going to get 10 feet tall this year, if healthy, and kind of take up a big portion of my garden. And this is the one that we use for bruises, but also used for blood circulation and lung health. This other plant that you're probably very aware of is called ground ivy or creeping Charlie, and it grows in everyone's lawns and everyone hates it, even though it's a fantastic ground cover. But it's the first thing that will start like greening up during the spring. It doesn't really die back in the winter. It stays healthy under the soil. And the Latin is also called creeping Charlie, and the Latin is Glaucoma heteracea. And one of the things that we use it for, it's not really a spring edible, tastes metallic, but it's used for ear infections. It really unclogs the ears, and for kids that have chronic ear infections, this is the best remedy. I harvest it around the middle of May when it has blue flowers on it, and dry it or tincture it. Actually, I do both, for ear infections and chronic ear infections in children. The other plant that you'll see a lot of right now when there's not a lot of other stuff happening is motherwort. And I know a lot of students in the past when I'm teaching and be like, I just see a lot of this plant, like what is it? And this one is one of the first things to pop up in the spring, and I don't know how it does it. It's extremely bitter. It's Leonardus cardiaca. It's called motherwort. It ends up being about 2.5 feet tall, and it's all over the place. It's a weed in the woodlands. It was brought over from Europe. It's a European species, and the leaves are extremely bitter. Even in the spring, it's actually even more bitter. Oh my God, it's unbelievably bitter. So if you just need a bitter while you're walking in the woods, you could eat these. It's really, 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 it's not my favorite taste. But motherwort is extreme bitter, so it has relaxant qualities to it. It also is used for trachycardia and for heart health and for heart palpitations and other things like that. The bitterness to it helps people pick up calcium, and so it's still used, was traditionally used to help with osteopenia and osteoporosis, which is the thinning of the bones, because it actually helps the body pick up more calcium with the bitterness. Okay, here is one you'll see. It gets a lot bigger leaves. It comes up really early. It comes up with the spring ephemerals, but it's not a spring ephemeral. It grows in the forest all year. It's a native, even though it feels like it's invasive because it will grow all over, and it's kind of all over my garden, even though I never planted it. And this one is called Virginia waterleaf, Hydrophyllum virginiatum, and any plant that is called Virginia anything as a Latin name, like Virginianum, or which is the common one, was named by Jefferson, because Thomas Jefferson was a botanist and he loved Virginia, and so any plant in America that's named Virginianum was actually, the botanical name was given by Thomas Jefferson, because he considered himself a botanist and loved Virginia, and so he named every single one of his Latin names Virginianum. So it's kind of, these get bigger. They have little like water dots on them. They're not used in medicine, but I like people to know all the other plants. They do have an astringent quality to them. They're not the strongest astringent, really not harvested or used that much. But you'll see it a lot, so I wanted you to know what it is. So this is a shrub that you might see sprouting. It's a little bit earlier. If we got a close-up, it looks like a little piece of broccoli in there. Do not eat it, it's poisonous.
Light.
Oh, the light. Do not eat it, it's poisonous. This is the poison elderberry, and it's Sambucus pubens. And this is red elderberry. It's going to flower in May. It looks like a little piece of broccoli in there. But otherwise, you know, before these flower buds come out and the leaf come out, you might think it's elderberry. And I can't tell you how many people I have talked to, and they tell me like, oh, I started some elderberry sprouts, and it's really fantastic. And I go to their elderberry sprouts, and all I have to see is that the inside of their stems has like a salmon color inside of it. And I know that they have the poison elderberry, and they haven't had the ability to see the sprouts because they harvested them during the winter. But the poison elderberry has a salmon colored pith. And so you're not actually growing the elderberry that we use in medicine, and it's totally poisonous. And the reason we know it's poisonous is because children have died, because this inner pith is really easy to take out, and people used to use it for straws. The elderberry, this pith was also taken out, and it was used for maple syruping. These are poisonous, the elderberry that are sprouting now, that bloom in May. And the bark, you know, the bark looks exactly the same as the elderberry that we use for medicine. It has the lenticels on the outside that are prominent lenticels. They're like little protrusions on the outside of the bark. But if they are blooming now and have little cauliflower or broccoli, or whatever you want to say on them, it is poisonous. So do not harvest this elder. So this is probably the most prominent plant in our parks these days. This is garlic mustard. I'm not going to harvest it and put it in my mouth right on trail, because of course dogs are peeing and I'm just right off trail. But this is garlic mustard. It is in the mustard family. And so what's interesting is I'm gonna find some dandelions for you, because I know they're growing at my house along the edge of the house. But dandelions and garlic mustard were both brought to this continent on the Mayflower, and dandelion started taking over this continent the second they arrived here. Very aggressive. Garlic mustard is very aggressive, but for some reason it's only taken over the continent in the last 30 years. Which is fascinating to me, because it's so aggressive and it's taken over all of the woodlands. And one of the ways that it's problematic is that it actually has a chemical in the roots that stops proteins of seeds from germinating. So it basically puts the seeds of other plants to sleep and stops them from growing. Now here are the little garlic mustard sprouts. Garlic mustard, much like dandelion, dandelion has a 98% germination rate for the seeds, and garlic mustard has like a 92 to 95% germination. So here's the little garlic mustard seeds. It was brought over on the Mayflower as a spring cleanser. It's really high in blood thinning properties of mustards. It's hot, and people ate it as a spring green in food. That's why it was brought over, to keep them healthy after the winter, to heat things up, to basically dispel all of the toxins and phlegm or whatever they thought they had in the winter. It's basically a mild purgative. It causes mild diarrhea in high doses, but full of vitamins A, C, and E, and will get rid of any cold that you were suffering from throughout the whole winter. So, and as we can see, it covers the whole forest, and people have been working diligently to eradicate it. It does not eradicate it. It does not eradicate very well. It just keeps taking over any spot that people aren't tending to constantly, and it's all over up until the Rocky Mountains. What's interesting is people are really upset with it because it stops other woodland plants from growing, and it's really sad because we've lost our medicinal plants. And so, much like buckthorn, we don't see the plants that we're supposed to be growing here. We see buckthorn and garlic mustard, which is basically our urban habitat now. But if we think about climate change, and we think about seed diversity, and what's about to happen, and that climate change might just be a short period of time, and the adaptability of plants, and I don't know. So I see these kind of invasive plants that are actually stopping other plants from germinating. It doesn't mean that they actually kill them. It means that they stop the proteins from starting the germination cycle where they start sprouting. And actually, garlic mustard keeps seeds viable for up to 100 years, longer than they would normally be viable, because it keeps the proteins intact, and proteins in plant is DNA. And who knows, maybe it's actually telling us something about adaptability and change, and that maybe it's actually keeping the DNA of plants kept well and undercover while climate change is happening. Who knows? So if you see this fungus, and this is for Kit because she found this fungus while she was walking on her plant ID. If you see this fungus on a tree, and there's lots of it in the woods, although there's more buckthorn in Theodorworth Park than there are these trees. But this little fungus, it doesn't actually harm the tree, which is interesting, but it only grows on wild cherry species. So there's Prunus serratina, there's Prunus pennsylvanica, but it only grows in those species. And so as you are getting to know trees in the woods, if you see this black fungus that's just on the stems, and we can see it, even more, you can see just like again and again and again, this black fungus that grows on the trees, you can know that's wild cherry. And the other way you can know it's wild cherry is you can pull off a stem and smell it or taste it, and it should smell like almonds because it has a hydrocyanic acid that smells like almonds. Now, we do not harvest. Oh my gosh, it smells so good actually. Just like almonds. And we do not, and it should taste like almonds too. But we do not harvest wild cherry at this time, the bark of it, because of the hydrocyanic acid. You can taste it, and it tastes fantastic. It tastes like almonds. It's rather strong right now, but we wait until the leaves come off because of the amount of hydrocyanic acid that's in here. May be dangerous. No one's died from wild cherry, but we wait till the leaves come off. We strip the leaves because that's where the plant will put the hydrocyanic acid, and then we harvest the bark. So that is about mid-May. But it's fun to smell it because it smells like almonds. And so if you're worried that you don't have the right plant and you found the fungus, just take a little limb off and smell it. If it smells like almonds, you have the right plant. So, but eventually you can harvest it. The leaves come out. It's just starting to leaf out. It's, you know, these prunus species, the leaf comes out really early, and it'll be kind of like a golden green red tinge, and you can be like, that's wild cherry. Now, understanding which variety it is, whether it's choke cherry or wild cherry or all that kind of thing, you have to wait till the flowers come out, so that gets a little bit more difficult. But all of them are used interchangeably. It's a antispasmodic for coughing. It is also an antihistamine. You can use it for people that have really red faces and who have high cytokines where their immune system is overreactive. It's really good for people that don't have good blood flow in the lungs, and it's an antispasmodic for the lungs. So I actually love wild cherry. I've learned more about wild cherry, and I can tell if someone needs wild cherry if the end of their fingertips are really dark red. And you can actually put wild cherry bark tincture on their fingertips and the blood will move back into their hand, which is fascinating. It just means that there's irritation of the capillaries, because if we look at the end of the fingers, that is the exchange of the capillaries, and if it's red, it means that blood is not moving very well there. If we think about the lung tissue, the alveoli deep in the lungs is the exchange of red blood cells, and if things are irritated and not moving well, there won't be as good of exchange and oxygenation of the blood. So wild cherry, for whatever reason, works on that, and I don't really know how.